Okay, so yet another incredibly important figure has stepped away from the Payday franchise. This time, he leaves a pretty big question in his wake, because for the very first time since Mio was officially appointed as Payday 3's game director, we have no idea who the current game director actually is. Shortly after Mio stepped down as the leading creative force behind Payday 3, it was announced that the responsibility of being the game director would be shared by Almir and Andreas. They've both been producers at Starbreeze and Overkill before that for an exceptionally long time. Together, they were both more than qualified to take the reins of Payday 3 when the time came. Both of them have been working with the Payday franchise since the days of Payday the Heist after all. A couple of months back though, we had a bit of a shake-up to this shared directorial responsibility when Almir stepped away from the company. To my understanding, his departure from the team left Andreas as Payday 3's sole game director, a position I imagine he held while still maintaining his responsibilities as the game's lead producer, so Andreas has probably been a very busy man for the last few months. But as of this Friday, Andreas isn't working at Starbreeze anymore either, stepping away with much more subtlety than Almir, given there wasn't a celebratory stream of Andreas' tenure at the company, but don't for a second let that undermine his importance to the franchise. Andreas appeared in a number of the pre-release dev diaries discussing design decisions from both a gameplay and tonal point of view for Payday 3. Crucially, once the game launched and, well, it didn't work for a little while, Andreas was right there with Almir addressing the community.
My name's Almir, you probably know who I am. I'm the brand director and head of community here at Starbreeze. With me, I have the lead producer on Payday 3, Andreas. You can say hi.
Hello, heisters.
We are here today because launch has not gone well.
Then, when the first dev update video came out and a much needed message on behalf of the studio was given, it fell on Andreas' shoulders to be the figurehead of that discussion. Of course, it isn't simply that he was there around the time of launch and was a public presence during that period that makes him so important to Payday 3. Andreas has appeared a number of times since launch, and when he and Almir first took on the titles of the game's directors, Andreas was quite quick to acknowledge the game's identity crisis. Something which was a big issue I had with the game during its first year. And if you have a look at some of the heists that we've received more recently, there is a noticeable improvement. Although we've certainly not settled on a crystal clear tone and style for Payday 3 just yet, the general aesthetic and feel of the content we've received more recently is, in my opinion, a significant improvement on what we had before. It's clear as day when you take some of the game's earlier heists, like my personal favourite heist, Touch the Sky, or even something more extravagant like the Golden Shark Bank. And you know what, let's throw in a couple of Year 1 DLCs as well, with the Boys in Blue police station and the rooftops of the Fear and Greed New York Stock Exchange. If we take those 4 heists and compare them to a simple backstreet of the delivery charge heist, or the interior of the warehouse itself, simply from an aesthetics perspective, I think there's been a significant improvement. And this isn't just because the most recent heist is set at night. We've seen a couple of nighttime heists in Payday 3 before, and I don't think any of them even hold a candle to delivery charge. To be clear, I'm not attributing this positive trend in heist design to Andreas single-handedly. I just thought it was worth acknowledging that he was quick to call out the game's identity crisis when stepping up as one of the directors, and then during his time at the helm, we saw a positive improvement in this area. I also really appreciate Andreas confirming the upcoming skills overhaul when he did. For those of you who may not know, shortly after the Party Powder heist released, Andreas shared a lot of details about the next heist, which at the time was the delivery charge heist, as well as confirming that a skills overhaul was in development and coming along quite nicely.
There's something I want to say, but I'm not really supposed to, but I'm probably gonna say it anyway. You guys have been asking about skills. There's a lot of feedback around the skills system. We have talked about doing a skills revamp, and we're actually doing it.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. Skills 2.0 is a thing. It's progressing very well. generally what we're doing with new skills is we're leaning more into archetypes, less constant upkeep, more action movie-like stuff. I'm not going to confirm a date for it yet, but it's moving along nicely. I think that's going to be a massive boost for the game.
This, honestly, didn't seem like something Andreas had checked if he could announce before he went ahead and brought it up, but it seemed like he knew it was an important thing for the community and decided that it would be better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Obviously, I don't know if that was the case, and maybe Andreas did have permission to share that, but either way, I think myself and the wider community were very appreciative to have Skills 2.0 confirmed after so long. Anyway, all of this is to say Andreas has done a lot for Payday 3, but also for the franchise as a whole over the years. So before we move on to the big question that should be on everybody's mind right now, Andreas, if you happen to be watching this, thank you for everything you've done for this franchise, and I wish you the best with whatever you move on to next. And please, for the love of God, never change your Twitter handle. Paydad is just too good. So, with the two people that we understood to be the game's current directors having both stepped away from the studio, who is actually in charge right now? Game director is an incredibly important role, and we've seen in the past the consequences of that role remaining vacant. But even worse than that would be if the wrong person ends up in that position. The answer for the time being is that I don't know. We have absolutely no idea who's currently steering the ship for Payday 3. We know that Jonas is the franchise's general manager, but that isn't the same thing as being the Payday 3 director. With how ambitious Starbreeze's goals for the Payday IP seem to be, I'd be quite concerned if the person who's responsible for managing each aspect of that expansion is also tasked with the daunting job of leading the Payday 3 team. I simply think Jonas would be spread far too thin for his own good, not to mention the good of the franchise as well. We might possibly find ourselves with an interim game director, somebody who has the role just for a short amount of time, and if that is the case, then I really hope a full-time director is appointed quickly. Remember, Payday 3 is a game that is really malleable at the moment. There's a lot that's going to change with the game over the next year or so. The company's new CEO, AK, has made it abundantly clear that he wants to be talking about a very different game in around 9 months, and not to mention, the community has also been very clear that there are elements of the game that we want to see reworked. We know that the skill system is already being reworked and have been shown what that's going to look like via some blog posts, but I also want to see some changes to the progression system, and I know the community's been very vocal about certain heist objectives, but it could be a cause for concern if all of these things are addressed, but under the direction of a handful of different people. If there's no consistency in the directorial vision, we might actually end up in a worse position than where we started. A potential example of this could be the hardcore challenges system. We first heard about this system back when the Mask Mania event took place, and have heard virtually nothing about it since. I would also hazard a guess that this system is nowhere near to completion, given that we were just sort of handed over the Mask Mania masks that were initially supposed to be part of this system as a gesture of goodwill at the start of the year. I doubt that's something the team would have done if the hardcore challenges system was near completion. I think the likelihood of the hardcore challenges system having the same vision behind it now as it did when it was first concepted is very unlikely, and that could have a really negative effect on the state at which the final version of that system actually makes its way into the game. We've all heard the saying, too many cooks in the kitchen, but I don't actually know if there's a saying for too many chefs working on the same dish, but each substituting out for each other at different points, and taking over the preparation of that dish, not necessarily having the full knowledge of the intention behind certain decisions being made from the start of the process. If that's not a term that exists already, then we'll coin it now as Payday 3 development. Either way, hopefully it won't be too long until we find out who the new game director is, but until we do, I will be holding my breath. If you've enjoyed this video, all I ask is that you consider subscribing, and if you want to know more about Payday 2's most recent update that released just over a week ago and marks the start of a brand new era for the second entry to the franchise, you can click the video on screen now for a full discussion about Update 241 and the new studio responsible for keeping Payday 2 alive. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.